Remember those lost 1980s family dinners that disappeared from our tables? They filled weeknights with sizzling skillets and laughter around the kitchen. How did we let those tasty traditions slip away? Stuffed green pepper boats were a weeknight hero for many families during the 1980s because they turned a humble bell pepper into a full and hearty dinner that felt like a celebration even on an ordinary Tuesday night. Parents loved how easy it was to stretch a single pound of ground beef by mixing it with cooked rice, diced onions, and a handful of herbs, then spooning the savory mixture into hollowed peppers that stood like little edible bowls. The peppers softened in the oven while the filling stayed juicy, and a final layer of tomato sauce or grated cheese gave it a bubbling finish that perfumed the whole kitchen. Children often raced to the table as the smell drifted down the hallway because the sight of those bright green boats promised comfort and a little fun. It was an easy way to sneak vegetables onto a plate without a fight, and it fed a crowd for just a few dollars, which mattered when grocery budgets felt tight. Monterey Jack Chicken Bake brought a mellow southwestern kick to suburban kitchens where new flavors were starting to matter in the early 1980s. Boneless chicken pieces browned in a single skillet and then baked beneath a blanket of mild Monterey Jack cheese that melted into creamy ribbons over a quick sauce of diced tomatoes, bell peppers, and mild chili powder. This dinner felt adventurous compared to plain roasted chicken but never overwhelmed cautious palates, making it perfect for families who wanted something different without straying too far. The aroma of bubbling cheese and warm spices filled the house, and the dish could be served straight from the pan with tortillas or buttered noodles. Home cooks loved how easily leftovers reheated for school lunches or late-night snacks. It captured a small piece of the decade's growing love for Tex-Mex flavors while staying firmly in the realm of easy weeknight cooking, and that balance helped it become a quiet classic that many still remember fondly today. Zucchini lasagna casserole arrived during the health-conscious wave that swept through the 1980s when people wanted lighter versions of their favorite comfort foods. Instead of thick pasta sheets, thinly sliced zucchini stood in for noodles, layered with ricotta cheese, tomato sauce, and a gentle sprinkle of Italian herbs. This clever swap pleased parents who were counting calories while still delivering the hearty, cheesy satisfaction of traditional lasagna. Families often grew zucchini in backyard gardens or bought it cheaply at roadside stands, so the dish quickly became a thrifty yet modern choice. When it baked, the kitchen filled with the same inviting scent of garlic and tomatoes, and children hardly noticed the absence of pasta. It proved that a vegetable-heavy dinner could still taste indulgent, and many people proudly served it to guests to show that healthy eating did not mean bland food. The casserole embodied the decade's push toward fresh produce and creative home cooking while holding on to the nostalgia of old Italian-American favorites. Honey mustard glazed pork chops brought sweet and tangy excitement to dinner tables that were often tired of plain meat and potatoes. Home cooks whisked together mustard, honey, and a splash of vinegar to create a golden glaze that clung to thick chops as they seared in a hot skillet. The sauce caramelized under the broiler, forming a sticky crust that released a mouth-watering aroma as soon as the oven door opened. This recipe required only a few pantry staples and a quick 30 minutes, making it a lifesaver for busy weeknights. Children loved the gentle sweetness, while adults appreciated the lively bite of mustard, a combination that felt sophisticated without being fussy. In the 1980s, when flavored mustards and gourmet condiments were suddenly everywhere in grocery stores, this dish captured the spirit of culinary experimentation. Served with roasted vegetables or buttered egg noodles, these pork chops turned an ordinary evening into something that felt a little special, proving that creativity could thrive even in simple family kitchens. Sloppy Joe. Biscuit pies took a beloved sandwich and gave it a playful twist perfect for busy families. Instead of spooning the saucy ground beef mixture onto plain buns, home cooks tucked it inside fluffy biscuit dough and baked until golden brown. The result was a handheld pocket that stayed warm and delicious, making it easy to serve at weeknight dinners or pack for school lunches the next day. The tangy tomato sauce soaked into the tender biscuit, creating a flavor that felt both familiar and new. Kids adored the fun of breaking into their own little pie, and parents liked how neatly it contained the usual mess of a sloppy Joe. This recipe reflected the decade's growing love for convenient finger foods and clever shortcuts without losing the heart of a home-cooked meal. It was budget-friendly, adaptable with vegetables or cheese, and a sure way to bring smiles to the table when everyone needed comfort after a long day. Sweet and sour. Meatball Skillet brought a taste of tropical adventure to family kitchens during the lively dining trends of the 1980s. Juicy meatballs simmered in a glossy sauce of pineapple juice, vinegar, and brown sugar, joined by colorful bell peppers and onions for a vibrant finish. The sweet fruit and tangy sauce balanced perfectly with savory beef, creating a crowd pleaser that felt both exotic and approachable. Many families served it over fluffy white rice, letting the sauce soak every grain and perfume the kitchen with a fragrant blend of fruit and spice. This recipe mirrored the decade's fascination with Polynesian-inspired flavors and the popularity of quick skillet meals. Parents loved that it used affordable pantry ingredients, while children loved the bright colors and candy-like glaze. It brought a vacation vibe to an ordinary evening, proving that dinner could transport everyone to a sunnier place even when the family stayed firmly in the suburbs. Spinach and bacon quiche became a national craze as brunch culture boomed in the early 1980s, and families happily carried the trend into their dinner routines. A buttery crust held a custard of eggs, cream, smoky bacon, and tender spinach leaves, baking into a rich pie that sliced beautifully for both casual and elegant meals. The contrast of salty bacon and earthy greens gave every bite a layered flavor that felt grown-up yet comforting. Busy parents loved that it could be assembled in advance and baked when everyone came home, while children enjoyed the silky texture and savory aroma wafting from the oven. It paired easily with a simple salad or even a cup of soup, making it a flexible centerpiece for weeknights or weekend guests. Quiche represented a shift toward continental sophistication in American cooking, and this particular version showed that vegetables and rich cream could coexist in perfect harmony. It became a reliable dinner star before quietly fading from most household menus. Stuffed shells with ricotta and spinach offered a hearty Italian-American comfort that felt festive enough for company, yet simple enough for a Monday night. Oversized pasta shells were boiled just until tender, then filled with a creamy mixture of ricotta cheese, chopped spinach, garlic, and herbs, before being nestled in bubbling tomato sauce. Families loved arranging the shells like little boats in a baking dish, sprinkling them generously with mozzarella, and watching the cheese melt into golden strands. The aroma of garlic and basil filled every corner of the house, drawing everyone to the kitchen. This dish balanced thrift and indulgence, stretching a modest amount of cheese and greens into a meal that could feed a crowd. In the 1980s, when Italian flavors were becoming everyday staples, stuffed shells offered a homemade alternative to restaurant dining that felt just as satisfying. It was a dish that invited conversation and second helpings, a perfect example of how simple ingredients created enduring family memories. Glazed ham with cola reduction turned a familiar holiday centerpiece into an easy Sunday dinner that still felt special. Cooks poured sweet cola over a spiral sliced ham and baked it slowly so the soda reduced into a sticky glaze that coated every slice. The gentle caramel flavor from the cola mingled with the smoky meat, filling the house with a warm, sugary scent that made waiting nearly impossible. Families often served it with potato salad or buttered green beans, and leftovers promised satisfying sandwiches for days. This recipe captured the fun, slightly experimental mood of the decade, when soda in cooking felt daring but approachable. It saved time and money by using a store-bought ham, yet delivered a taste that seemed restaurant-worthy. For many households, it became the centerpiece of both celebrations and casual dinners, embodying the playful creativity of 80s kitchens before gradually fading from weekly menus as trends shifted toward leaner proteins. Turkey tetrazzini was a creamy spaghetti casserole that turned holiday leftovers into a beloved family meal. Tender strands of pasta mixed with roasted turkey, mushrooms, and peas were coated in a velvety sauce of butter, flour, and milk before being topped with breadcrumbs and baked until golden. The dish transformed scraps of turkey into something elegant and filling, stretching a small amount of meat to feed a large table. The smell of garlic and Parmesan drifting from the oven brought everyone to the kitchen long before dinner was served. Parents loved its economy and reliability, while children delighted in the crunchy breadcrumb topping that hid a luscious interior. In the 1980s, when home cooks valued hearty one-dish meals, turkey tetrazzini fit perfectly, offering comfort and a touch of sophistication without straining the budget. It remains a quiet legend of weeknight creativity, a recipe that once defined family togetherness and now lingers mostly in memory for those who tasted its rich, creamy charm. Teriyaki London broil brought a burst of Asian-inspired excitement to the 1980s dinner table and quickly became a family favorite for home cooks eager to explore new flavors without leaving their kitchens. A lean cut of beef was marinated for hours in a mixture of soy sauce, garlic, brown sugar, and a splash of ginger, allowing the flavors to seep deep into the meat before it hit the broiler or grill. As it cooked, the sweet and savory glaze caramelized into a shiny coating that perfumed the air with a scent both foreign and comforting. Thin slices revealed tender beef with a gentle sweetness that paired perfectly with steamed rice or simple vegetables. Families loved how the recipe fit easily into busy schedules since the marinade could be prepared the night before, and the cooking required little more than a hot oven and a watchful eye. It was a dish that felt modern and worldly while staying affordable, proving that a touch of soy sauce could open an entire decade of flavor possibilities for American families hungry for something different. Cheddar broccoli rice. Bake turned basic pantry staples into a bubbling potluck masterpiece that graced countless church suppers and weeknight dinners across the 1980s. Steamed broccoli florets and tender white rice were folded into a velvety cheese sauce made from sharp cheddar, milk, and a hint of butter, then baked until a golden crust formed on top. The smell of melting cheese filled the kitchen and promised a rich, creamy bite with every spoonful. Children who usually shunned green vegetables happily dug in when they were cloaked in that luscious sauce, and parents quietly celebrated a small victory. Leftovers reheated beautifully, making it a practical choice for families watching both time and budget. This casserole embodied the decade's love of hearty yet convenient comfort food, a dish that could travel from home to potluck with ease and always earn requests for the recipe. It is remembered not just for its flavor, but for the sense of gathering and generosity it brought to every table it touched. Southwest taco pie captured the bright spirit of Tex-Mex cuisine that swept through suburban kitchens during the lively 1980s. Layers of soft tortillas held seasoned ground beef, refried beans, melted cheddar cheese, and a mild tomato chili sauce, all stacked high in a pie dish before baking to bubbling perfection. When sliced, it revealed colorful stripes of flavor that looked as inviting as any restaurant creation and filled the room with the aroma of cumin and warm corn. Families loved how easily it fed a crowd, whether for casual weeknight dinners or weekend get-togethers with friends. Children piled on extra sour cream while adults added a shake of hot sauce, making every serving customizable. The dish reflected the era's excitement for Southwest flavors while staying gentle enough for every palate, proving that family dinners could be both adventurous and comforting. It became a bridge between classic American casseroles and the bolder spices of the border, a recipe that lingers warmly in memory even after fading from everyday menus. Barbecue chicken pizza on French bread offered a playful twist on pizza night long before artisan pies became trendy, and it fit perfectly with the experimental food mood of the 1980s. Crusty French bread split lengthwise became the base, brushed with tangy barbecue sauce instead of tomato, then topped with shredded chicken, red onions, and a generous blanket of mozzarella cheese. The bread crisped beautifully in a hot oven while the sweet, smoky aroma filled the house, turning an ordinary evening into something exciting. Parents liked how quickly it came together using leftover roast chicken, while children loved the bold flavor that felt like a treat from a fancy restaurant. It was a clever answer to busy schedules, needing only a baking sheet and a few simple ingredients. This recipe captured the California-style pizza trend and gave it a family-friendly twist that could be made in any kitchen. It remains a symbol of the decade's willingness to mix flavors and break old culinary rules with delicious results. Shepherd's pie with instant mashed potatoes became a trusted lifesaver for families seeking quick comfort when the day had been long and the budget short. Ground beef or leftover roast lamb simmered with onions, carrots, and peas in a thick gravy before being spread with a smooth layer of instant mashed potatoes that browned beautifully under the broiler. The convenience of instant potatoes meant no peeling or boiling, a gift to tired parents in the bustling 1980s. As it baked, the savory scent of meat and herbs filled the house, drawing everyone to the table. Children loved cracking through the golden crust to the rich filling beneath, and leftovers reheated like a dream. This dish proved that comfort food could evolve with the times while keeping its heart intact. It was old-world tradition meeting modern convenience, and for many families it became a symbol of how a simple dinner could soothe both hunger and the stress of a fast-moving decade without sacrificing taste or warmth. Stuffed cabbage rolls in tomato sauce carried old-world tradition straight into the heart of 1980s American kitchens, offering cozy satisfaction with every bite. Large cabbage leaves were carefully blanched and filled with a savory mixture of ground beef, rice, and herbs before being rolled tight and simmered in a sweet, tangy tomato sauce. The slow cooking filled the house with a comforting aroma that reminded many of their immigrant grandparents and the careful meals of earlier generations. Families appreciated how the recipe stretched a small amount of meat to feed a crowd and how well it reheated for busy nights. Children often marveled at the neat green parcels, while adults savored the balance of tender cabbage and hearty filling. Though the process required patience, the result felt celebratory and deeply nourishing. In an era that embraced convenience, this dish remained a proud link to heritage and showed that some traditions were too delicious to forget, even as trends shifted toward faster and simpler meals. Chicken Dijon skillet gave home cooks a touch of Parisian bistro charm without leaving their suburban kitchens and became a quiet star of the 1980s. Boneless chicken breasts were quickly browned, then bathed in a silky sauce of Dijon mustard, cream, and white wine that reduced to a luscious glaze. The tangy mustard cut through the richness, creating a balanced flavor that felt elegant yet approachable. Served over buttered noodles or rice, it made weeknights feel like a special occasion. Parents enjoyed how it came together in one pan in less than 30 minutes, while guests were always impressed by its sophisticated aroma. This dish reflected the decade's fascination with French-inspired cooking made simple for American families. It proved that even with busy schedules, a home cook could bring a little European flair to the dinner table and delight everyone with a meal that tasted far more luxurious than its modest ingredients and quick preparation would ever suggest to anyone passing through the kitchen doorway. Sausage and peppers hoagies turned any evening into a bustling street fair inside the comfort of a family kitchen. Sweet Italian sausages sizzled in a skillet with onions and colorful bell peppers until the vegetables softened and the meat browned, releasing a mouth-watering aroma that hinted of summer carnivals and city sidewalks. Warm, crusty rolls soaked up the flavorful juices, holding everything together for a messy but irresistible sandwich. This hearty meal delighted teenagers and parents alike, feeding a hungry crowd without fuss. It captured the decade's growing appetite for bold flavors and casual dining, when handheld meals felt both festive and practical. With each bite of smoky sausage and sweet peppers, families tasted a hint of urban excitement even in quiet suburbs. It was easy to prepare, easy to share, and unforgettable once you had it. The kind of dinner that turned an ordinary Wednesday night into a small celebration of flavor and togetherness that defined so many evenings in the 1980s. Ham and Swiss stromboli made game night or movie night feel like a party and showcased the fun side of 1980s home cooking. Soft bread dough was rolled out and layered with thin slices of smoky ham, nutty Swiss cheese, and a sprinkle of herbs before being tightly rolled and baked until golden brown. When sliced, it revealed beautiful spirals of melted cheese and savory meat, sending a buttery scent through the kitchen that lured everyone to the table. Families loved how easy it was to customize with extra vegetables or different cheeses, and leftovers were just as good cold the next day. It was portable, shareable, and delightfully indulgent, a perfect centerpiece for informal gatherings or quick family dinners. The recipe embodied the decade's love for hearty, crowd-pleasing foods that felt a little bit fancy without demanding extra effort. One bite of that warm, cheesy swirl could brighten any evening and create memories that lasted long after the last slice disappeared from the platter. Cornbread chili bake combined two beloved comfort foods into one bubbling dish that perfectly captured the hearty spirit of the 1980s. A spicy chili of ground beef, beans, and tomatoes was poured into a baking dish and topped with a thick layer of cornbread batter that baked into a golden crust. As it cooked, the savory chili bubbled up around the edges, scenting the kitchen with the warm aroma of cumin and sweet corn. Families loved how it provided both main course and bread in one easy pan, saving time and cleanup on busy weeknights. The sweet cornbread balanced the heat of the chili, creating a satisfying contrast that appealed to every palate. This casserole traveled well to potlucks and reheated beautifully, making it a dependable favorite for gatherings. It embodied the decade's love for robust, family-friendly meals that filled stomachs and hearts alike. Even as tastes have shifted, memories of this simple but powerful dinner continue to bring smiles to those who grew up with it on their tables. Apricot-glazed Cornish hens brought a touch of restaurant-style elegance to suburban dining rooms in the 1980s and gave families a reason to gather for something that felt truly special. These petite birds were brushed with a glossy glaze of apricot preserves, orange juice, and a hint of ginger before roasting until their skin turned deep golden and crisp. The sweet fruit balanced the savory meat and filled the house with a perfume that signaled celebration even when there was no holiday on the calendar. Parents liked how the small size of each hen created perfect single servings while still looking dramatic on the platter. Children loved having their own little bird to carve, which made the meal feel like an event. Despite the fancy appearance, the recipe was simple enough for a weeknight when someone wanted to impress guests or just break the routine of chicken and potatoes. It became a quiet symbol of the decade's desire for affordable luxury and the belief that elegance could start in an ordinary family kitchen. Beef and broccoli. Stir-fry reflected the growing fascination with Chinese-American takeout flavors during the fast-paced 1980s and gave home cooks a speedy way to serve something fresh and colorful. Thin strips of beef were quickly seared in a hot skillet, then tossed with bright green broccoli florets and a glossy sauce of soy, garlic, and ginger. The sizzling sounds and fragrant steam made dinner time exciting, and the entire meal came together in less than 20 minutes, perfect for busy households balancing work and school schedules. Steamed rice soaked up the savory sauce while tender vegetables added a satisfying crunch. Families loved that it tasted just like a favorite restaurant dish but cost far less and could be customized with extra vegetables or different cuts of meat. It became a weeknight hero and a gateway to broader Asian-inspired cooking, proving that a simple skillet could bring global flavor to the American table without sacrificing convenience or comfort in any way. Ratatouille over buttered noodles brought a slice of French countryside charm to 80s kitchens that were eager for gourmet inspiration but needed recipes that still felt practical. A rainbow of zucchini, eggplant, bell peppers, and tomatoes simmered slowly with garlic and olive oil until tender, creating a rustic vegetable stew rich with natural sweetness. Instead of serving it alone as in traditional French cooking, home cooks ladled the fragrant mixture over buttered egg noodles, a clever American twist that turned the dish into a full dinner. The combination of silky vegetables and warm noodles satisfied meat eaters and vegetarians alike while filling the kitchen with the comforting scent of herbs and roasted produce. It was an approachable way to explore European flavors and a subtle nod to the decade's rising interest in lighter, plant-focused meals. Families appreciated how it used inexpensive seasonal vegetables while still feeling elegant enough for guests, making it a beloved yet quietly sophisticated option that stood out in neighborhood potlucks and intimate family suppers. stuffed portobello mushrooms became a surprising star of vegetarian cooking during the 1980s when larger mushroom caps first became widely available in grocery stores. Each giant cap acted as a natural bowl ready to hold a mixture of breadcrumbs, garlic, spinach, herbs, and a generous sprinkle of Parmesan cheese. Baked until the filling turned golden and the mushroom edges crisped, they emerged from the oven smelling earthy and rich. This dish appealed to families seeking meatless meals without giving up the sense of a hearty centerpiece, and even committed carnivores found themselves satisfied. The presentation looked elegant on a platter, perfect for dinner parties or a weekend meal that needed to impress. Parents appreciated how quickly the recipe came together and how easily it could be adjusted with different cheeses or chopped vegetables. It was a symbol of the decade's growing interest in healthier eating and creative vegetables, a meal that made mushrooms feel grand and exciting rather than simply an afterthought on the side of a plate. Baked spaghetti pie transformed leftover pasta into a show-stopping family dinner that delighted children and adults alike during the 1980s. Cooked spaghetti was tossed with beaten eggs, grated cheese, and a bit of cream, then pressed into a pie plate to form a crust that held a hearty filling of marinara sauce, seasoned beef, and more cheese. After baking, the pie sliced neatly into wedges like a savory cake, each slice revealing layers of noodles and sauce. The aroma of garlic and tomatoes filled the kitchen while the top turned golden and crisp. Busy parents loved how it stretched a small amount of meat to feed a crowd and turned a familiar food into something fun and unexpected. It became a go-to dish for potlucks, birthday parties, and casual Sunday dinners because it traveled well and always drew smiles. This clever recipe captured the playful creativity of the decade, proving that even a plate of spaghetti could be reborn as something entirely new and memorable. Chicken and wild rice casserole stood as a creamy one-dish comfort that anchored countless church suppers and neighborhood gatherings in the 1980s. Tender pieces of chicken mixed with nutty wild rice, celery, and onions were enveloped in a sauce made from cream, butter, and chicken broth, then baked until bubbling and fragrant. The earthy aroma filled kitchens with warmth, and the casserole's rich texture made every bite deeply satisfying. Cooks appreciated how it could be prepared ahead of time and reheated without losing flavor, a blessing for busy schedules. Children loved the gentle, cozy taste, while adults welcomed the balance of hearty grains and lean poultry. It symbolized the decade's love of potluck-friendly dishes that could feed a crowd without stress and still feel special enough for Sunday dinner. For many families, this casserole became a signature recipe passed from parent to child, a creamy reminder of fellowship and the simple pleasures of sharing a meal that nourished both body and heart. Glazed meatloaf with brown sugar ketchup. Topping put a sweet modern spin on a classic American comfort and quickly earned a loyal following during the 1980s. Ground beef mixed with breadcrumbs, onions, and seasonings formed the hearty loaf. But the magic came from the topping, a blend of ketchup and brown sugar that caramelized as it baked. The glaze turned glossy and slightly sticky, creating a beautiful contrast to the savory meat beneath. The scent of sweet tomatoes and roasting beef filled the house and made waiting for dinner almost impossible. Families appreciated how the recipe elevated a humble staple into something that felt new and indulgent. Leftovers made excellent sandwiches the next day, stretching the value of the meal even further. It became a weeknight favorite and a dependable dish for casual entertaining, reflecting the decade's trend of taking familiar classics and giving them a playful, flavorful upgrade that satisfied both nostalgic cravings and a desire for something just a little different. Seafood Newburg over puff pastry brought a touch of coastal luxury to inland kitchens, offering an elegant treat that felt fit for a fine restaurant yet could be made at home. A rich sherry-laced cream sauce held tender shrimp, scallops, and chunks of crab, all spooned over flaky puff pastry shells that baked into golden layers. The aroma of seafood and butter filled the house, creating anticipation long before the first bite. This dish reflected the 1980s fascination with sophisticated entertaining and showed that even a family dinner could feel extravagant. Hosts loved that it could be prepared partly in advance, while guests were impressed by the beautiful presentation. It turned ordinary weekends into occasions and introduced many households to ingredients they rarely used. For families far from the ocean, it offered a taste of the seaside without the cost of travel, a decadent meal that demonstrated how creative home cooking could bring a bit of luxury to everyday life in a busy and ambitious decade. Stuffed acorn squash with sausage and apples brought the colors and flavors of autumn into the heart of family kitchens during the 1980s. Halved acorn squash roasted until tender, then filled with a savory mixture of brown sausage, diced apples, onions, and herbs that mingled in a balance of sweet and salty delight. The scent of roasting squash and warm spices made the entire home smell like a harvest festival. Families appreciated how the recipe made use of inexpensive seasonal produce while still feeling special and satisfying. Each squash half served as its own bowl, adding a charming touch to the dinner table and making cleanup simple. It became a favorite for chilly nights and small gatherings, showing that comfort food could also be beautiful. This dish captured the era's growing interest in fresh ingredients and creative presentations, proving that a humble vegetable could hold its own as the star of an unforgettable meal shared with loved ones at the close of a crisp autumn day. Pasta Primavera with garden vegetables embodied the lighter side of 1980s New American cooking and celebrated the bounty of fresh produce available in farmers markets and backyard gardens. Thin strands of pasta were tossed with a medley of brightly colored vegetables such as zucchini, carrots, bell peppers, and asparagus, all sautéed gently in olive oil and garlic. A splash of cream or a sprinkle of Parmesan added just enough richness without overshadowing the freshness of the vegetables. This dish appealed to families seeking healthier meals that still felt indulgent and satisfying. It became a symbol of a new culinary direction, one that valued vibrant flavors and seasonal ingredients over heavy sauces. Busy parents liked that it came together quickly while still presenting beautifully on the plate, and children were often surprised by how flavorful a vegetable-forward dinner could be. Pasta Primavera captured a hopeful moment in American cooking, when freshness and color became just as exciting as tradition and comfort. In medieval Europe, fish and root vegetables were the most common thing for a majority of the population. Most of them could not afford to sustainably get meat every single time they went out for grocery shopping. It was also something that was really preferred by religious followers of the church, although I can't really imagine a specific reason why. For root vegetables, I can see veganism being something a well-intending church appreciates, but then why the meat? If there are any history buffs in the comments, let us know. Now, the dish itself would change a lot. This would heavily depend on the kind of climate and geography you were working with. Coastal regions, like along the North Sea or the Baltic, for example, had a dense ecosystem of marine life. They had herring, whiting, haddock and cod, salmon or crabs, and people would often just work with whatever the catch of the day was. These fish would be salted and dried as much as they could, both for inland trade and for winter preservation. Root vegetables were also dearly important to people because they were one of the few kinds of vegetables that could withstand poor soils and still last through the winter. One of these vegetables was the iconic carrot, and here's an interesting fact. In medieval times, you actually had purple and yellow carrots instead of orange. Some of the best dishes come from necessity, and few ingredients are as dependable as potatoes. For generations, scalloped potatoes were a staple at homecoming dinners, potlucks, and Sunday feasts. Thinly sliced and baked in a rich, velvety sauce, they were a testament to the idea that simple ingredients, when treated right, could feel downright luxurious. Potatoes were the backbone of many American kitchens. They were cheap, easy to store, and could feed an entire family without much effort. The addition of a creamy sauce, made from milk, butter, and a touch of garlic, elevated this humble dish into something special. Some versions kept it simple, while others included layers of cheese, turning it into a gooey, golden masterpiece. Either way, it was a comforting, belly-filling side that paired well with just about any main course. The cooking process required patience. Proper scalloped potatoes weren't rushed, each layer had to absorb the sauce, and the top needed time to develop that perfect golden crust. But as boxed potato mixes and instant gratins took over, homemade scalloped potatoes started to fade from dinner tables. One of the next inventive things people came up with during really hard times was potato peel soup. This is about as bare bones as it sounds because it's really just seasoned water that's been made into a makeshift broth with potato peels in there. Despite this, let me tell you a little about why this is a pretty good dish. It's because it keeps you full for an incredible amount of time. Have you ever had oatmeal and felt incredibly full afterward? For like a surprisingly long amount of time? This is because oatmeal has a substantial amount of fiber in it, and potatoes are pretty much the same. Half their fiber content comes from the peel itself, actually. This is what makes potato peel soup such a good dish for when you don't really have any kind of money. It sustains you and really helps keep your appetite down, which is sad in retrospect because you have to be keeping your hunger down, but these days we have to do that pretty often. It helps to have dishes that are really good with fiber because they have this nice effect of you wanting less food, and thus you have more money at the end of the day. Of all the risky delicacies in food history, few come with stakes as high as canned puffer fish. Revered for its delicate taste, yet feared for its lethal potential, this fish contains tetrodotoxin, a neurotoxin so potent that a dose smaller than a pinhead can cause paralysis and death. Today, only highly trained chefs are allowed to prepare it, but in the past, access was far less controlled. In unregulated markets, improperly prepared fugu was available in cans, turning a simple meal into a gamble with survival. The appeal of fugu wasn't just about flavor, it was about thrill. For some, eating it was a status symbol, a culinary daredevil act that proved one's bravery. But unlike most food-related risks, this one didn't end with an upset stomach. There's no antidote for tetrodotoxin, meaning a mistake in preparation could be fatal. Yet, regulations in the 1960s weren't nearly as strict as they are today, and canned versions were sold in some markets without the careful oversight now required. As reports of poisoning surfaced, authorities clamped down. Many countries banned unregulated sales, limiting its preparation to certified chefs. Cabbage and corned beef hash have a really practical history in American food culture. It's something that came about as a humble wartime dish whose purpose was to turn any leftovers into something that could really get people seated at the table, but it also just shows you how resourceful people were. Corned beef hash was pretty recent considering it made its name during World War I and World War II, right when it was introduced into the United States. The canned version, like the Hormel's cans you've probably seen lining up grocery store marts, is actually something that was the lifeblood of many people back then. Corned beef hash was an insane step forward because it meant that rationed, affordable, preserved meat was now more accessible than ever. And that only meant that things like cabbage, which were year-round vegetables, were that much more in demand as side items, ingredients, and toppings. Corned beef hash was a way for people to have cheap calories and protein, and it makes sense too, because the thing was designed for maximum efficiency, so it could be used by soldiers during wartime. Processed meats have long been a fixture of the American diet, offering convenience, affordability, and a satisfying smoky flavor. But there was one key ingredient that made these meats last longer and look more appetizing: sodium nitrate. In the 1960s, it was used liberally in everything from bacon to hot dogs, ensuring bright red hues and extended shelf life. Few questioned what made their deli meat so vibrant, but as science advanced, concerns began to emerge. At the time, food preservation was a priority, and sodium nitrate was seen as a practical solution. It prevented bacterial growth and gave processed meats a signature cured taste. However, researchers later discovered a darker side. When exposed to high heat, sodium nitrate could form nitrosamines, compounds linked to cancer in animal studies. While a single ham sandwich wasn't a cause for alarm, a lifetime of consuming highly processed meats raised significant health concerns. By the 1970s, regulatory agencies stepped in, limiting nitrate levels and requiring careful monitoring. While still legal today in controlled amounts, many consumers now seek nitrate-free options. The story of sodium nitrate serves as a reminder that food science is constantly evolving. Eggplant parmesan was the dinner that looked like it took all day but was secretly built on shortcuts. Frozen breaded eggplant rounds, if you could find them, jarred marinara sauce, a bag of shredded mozzarella, and maybe some Parmesan if it wasn't too expensive that week. You layered it all like lasagna: sauce, eggplant, cheese, repeat. Baked it till the edges bubbled and the kitchen smelled like you knew what you were doing. It was meatless, but no one complained. It was heavy enough to count. Kids picked around the eggplant for cheese. Dads ate it with white bread and butter on the side. It was a Friday night special when money was tight, or a Sunday dinner for Catholics avoiding meat. The eggplant always went soggy after reheating, but no one minded. It filled the belly and stretched a few ingredients into a tray big enough to feed 6. Some called it Italian, but it was more like American survival with a red sauce. It looked impressive, tasted decent, and made you feel like you'd pulled off something grand. Even if it came from the freezer aisle and took 20 minutes to throw together, that golden cheese crust gave it the shine of love. Bread pudding with water sauce is about as simplistic as it comes. This is a dish that people didn't even really put any thought into. It was just a way for them to repurpose resources that were about to spoil and go to waste. This is really something you never want happening in the Depression, because it was a sign that you were just not handling your pantry properly. Back then, people religiously followed a mindset of not wasting anything, even the grease and drippings from bacon, and you'll find a dish or two made out of that later on in this video too. Back to bread pudding with water sauce. So, you might have heard of bread pudding before, but what really is water sauce? I mean, it sounds like a bastardized version of sparkling water when you first hear it. It's actually just a modest attempt at making a thickened sauce out of just water, because most of the time people were not working with any kind of legitimate thickener or enough ingredients to make a proper sauce, so they had to settle for whatever they could come up with to make stale bread more refreshing. The bread pudding in question is essentially just stale, almost moldy bread soaked in sweetened water, and most of the time, the sweetening was with things like maple syrup. Even this is something people began to tap out of maple trees whenever they could, because they couldn't spend the extra cents. Still, we have a lot more leverage nowadays, so you can probably actually make a decent bread pudding-based sauce dish with enough ingredients and guidance, but the next time you really need to finish some bread, you know what to make. Boiled salt pork and beans are pretty much the same deal. Now, beans just happen to be man's best friend when the going gets rough. You have so many different kinds of them, and you can have twice as many different kinds of food with them. Stews, soups, or something as economical as this. Boiled salt pork and beans actually stems from the Depression era, and it was a way to stretch out meat rations when they were running low, which was usually always. This is more beans than pork, I'll admit, but either way, it's a protein power punch that you don't want to be missing from your diet. Boiled salt pork and beans are also some of the easiest kinds of plates of food you can make. You don't really need to do anything besides just take the salt pork and boil it, along with the beans, adding whatever seasonings, aromatics, and herbs you prefer. That's pretty much how a lot of people used it back then anyway, although we have the benefit of choosing much better cuts of meat than they did. Even with a dish like this, in the Depression era, people would essentially just wait until the butcher's shops were discarding their most unwanted parts of the animal, and that's what they would buy for as cheap of a price as they could bargain for. It was usually something most shops were happy to let go of for some chump change, but nowadays, even that's like half your rent. In an era defined by boundless optimism and experimental remedies, a curious tonic emerged: Radithor, or radioactive water. During a time when scientific breakthroughs were celebrated without the benefit of modern safety protocols, this radium-infused elixir was marketed as a miracle drink, promising renewed vitality. Companies boldly touted its rejuvenating properties while food safety oversight was in its infancy, and regulations lagged behind the fervor for innovation. Although endorsements by well-known figures lent it credibility, users eventually discovered that regular consumption led to severe health risks, including bone decay and radiation poisoning, a grim reminder that not every scientific experiment was a step forward. Intriguingly, advertisements depicted Radithor as a fountain of youth in a bottle, a claim that today would undoubtedly trigger public outcry rather than applause. Its popularity stemmed from the era's trust in emerging technologies and a willingness to embrace unconventional treatments during uncertain times. The tale of Radithor serves as a compelling chapter in our culinary and pharmaceutical history, highlighting a period when progress sometimes outpaced prudence. A perfectly roasted chicken was once the ultimate symbol of home cooking. Before rotisserie chickens lined supermarket shelves, families gathered around the table for a golden, crispy-skinned bird fresh from the oven. Coated in a flavorful crust of herbs and breadcrumbs, this dish turned an everyday staple into something worthy of a special occasion. Whole chickens were a budget-friendly choice, stretching across multiple meals. Unlike pre-cut pieces, a whole bird could be roasted, carved, and repurposed into soups or sandwiches, making it a practical investment. The breadcrumb and herb crust added texture and flavor, sealing in juices while creating a beautifully crisp exterior. Traditional blends featured rosemary, thyme, and parsley, but regional variations introduced garlic, lemon zest, or even a hint of paprika for extra depth. Pre-seasoned chicken breasts, boneless cuts, and store-bought rotisserie birds made the slow-roasted whole chicken tradition feel unnecessary. For many, the extra step of trussing, seasoning, and roasting no longer fit into busy weeknight schedules. Yet, for those who remember the aroma of herbs mingling with sizzling chicken fat in a warm oven, there's no substitute. A household staple for decades, canned tuna was a go-to choice for quick meals and affordable protein. Packed with convenience and a mild flavor that fit everything from sandwiches to casseroles, its popularity surged throughout the 20th century. But hidden beneath its silver lid was an ingredient no one had bargained for: mercury. Some brands of tuna contained alarmingly high levels of the toxic metal, a risk that went largely unnoticed in the 1960s when food safety regulations had yet to catch up with modern science. Back then, concerns over contaminants weren't front-page news. The average consumer had little reason to suspect that a simple tuna salad might come with a side of neurological damage. Mercury, a heavy metal that can accumulate in the body, posed serious health risks, especially for pregnant women and young children. Symptoms of mercury poisoning included cognitive impairments, muscle weakness, and developmental issues, hardly what anyone expected from a lunchtime staple. As research progressed, regulatory agencies stepped in. By the 1970s, the FDA began imposing stricter limits on mercury levels in seafood, and today, guidelines recommend limiting the consumption of certain fish. Potato pancakes, crispy, golden, and sizzling in a cast-iron skillet, were where leftovers became a family ritual. You could use leftover mashed potatoes from last night's dinner, or go old school with grated raw potatoes, onions, eggs, and a little flour. Either way, they were slapped onto a hot pan, fried till the edges were lacy and the inside stayed soft. They weren't fancy. They were peasant food, and proud of it. A little sour cream or applesauce on the side if you had it, ketchup if you didn't. You ate them with your fingers when no one was looking. Sometimes they came out heavy, like hockey pucks. Sometimes they were light and crispy like something from Grandma's better days. In Eastern European homes, they were tradition. In American kitchens, they were improvisation. You made them because you didn't waste food, and you didn't waste time either. They reheated well in a pan and even better in a kid's memory. You didn't call them latkes unless it was Hanukkah. Otherwise, they were just potato pancakes, fried in oil, made with whatever was left, and eaten in silence, except for the crunch. One bite and the past came rushing back, hot, crispy, and deeply familiar. Mock fried chicken steak is a really interesting one because this actually makes use of so many things in creative ways to mimic the texture, taste, and overall feeling of fried chicken steak. Traditionally, the recipe calls for cheap cuts of meat, but in the Great Depression, people were even running with non-meat ingredients thanks to World War II rationing, which really put a massive hole in America's overall meat supply. In the 50s, too, home cooks brought this recipe back when they really needed to stretch a small amount of protein or use government food. So if you make this dish with ground meat or beef pork and shape it into a patty, mix it with breadcrumbs and cracker crumbs, and then douse it in seasoned flour or cracker crumbs again, then pan fry it, you get a pretty decent imitation of chicken fried steak. You just have to be really careful with what kind of seasonings you use because it's also true that the kind of seasoning you go with decides how good of an imitation of a chicken fried steak this is. The most interesting part is probably the flour-based version, which was straight out of the Depression. People would make a fritter using flour, milk, and eggs to make something that resembled a steak, and this was seasoned and fried. There was no meat, but it was meant to imitate the breading, flour-y taste of the meal anyway. In all cases, it was a comfort meat, and a chunk of that comfort was that it kept your wallet in good health. Once a humble staple of farmhouse kitchens, savory sweet onion pie was a testament to how simple ingredients could be transformed into something extraordinary. With its flaky crust, velvety custard, and layers of slow caramelized onions, this pie was both comforting and surprisingly elegant, a dish that fit just as well on a holiday table as it did at a casual family dinner. Onions have long been one of the most affordable and widely available vegetables, making them a practical choice for home cooks looking to stretch their budget. When cooked low and slow, their sharp bite mellowed into a deep, natural sweetness. Combined with eggs, cream, and sometimes a sprinkle of cheese, they created a rich, quiche-like filling that was both satisfying and economical. Some versions leaned into the southern tradition of sweet onions, using Vidalias to enhance the dish's natural sugars. So, why did this once popular pie disappear? As savory tarts and quiches became more associated with upscale brunches rather than home-cooked meals, hearty onion-based dishes faded from everyday menus. The rise of pre-made frozen quiches also contributed, making from-scratch versions less common. In the mid-20th century, the agricultural industry was on a mission to maximize production, and antibiotics played a key role in that effort. One in particular, chloramphenicol, became a popular choice for keeping livestock healthy and increasing meat yields. Farmers saw it as an efficient way to prevent infections in crowded conditions, while food producers benefited from higher output. For a time, it seemed like a win-win until scientists uncovered the serious health risks lurking beneath the surface. Unlike some antibiotics that merely disrupt digestion, chloramphenicol posed a far more alarming danger: aplastic anemia, a rare but potentially fatal condition where the body stops producing enough blood cells. The problem wasn't just with direct exposure. Traces of the antibiotic could linger in meat and dairy products, making their way onto dinner tables across the country. Consumers had no way of knowing that their Sunday roast might come with a side of medical complications. As evidence mounted, regulators took action. By the 1980s, chloramphenicol was banned in food production in many countries, including the United States. Today, strict testing ensures that no remnants make it into the food supply. Stuffed shells were dinner that looked like love. Not the quick kind, but the kind that took time. Boiling pasta, mixing ricotta with egg and herbs, ladling sauce, sprinkling cheese, and sliding it all into the oven. It was the kind of meal you made when the paycheck landed, the weekend started, or you wanted everyone to sit down at the table together. There was always enough to feed a neighbor or save for lunch the next day. It was filling, rich, and made a kitchen smell like a promise. The shells held the ricotta like little pockets of warmth, and the red sauce bubbled around them like a hug. No shortcuts, no mystery powders or packets. Just pasta, cheese, sauce, and the kind of effort that said, "You matter." Dads appreciated the leftovers. Kids fought over the browned edges. Moms quietly savored the first bite before anyone else sat down. It was a dish for gathering, sharing, and holding on to something solid in a fast, loud world. There was a time when vegetables weren't just steamed and forgotten on the side of the plate. They were the star of the meal. This dish took humble cauliflower and elevated it to something rich, comforting, and undeniably satisfying. Baked in a velvety cheese sauce and topped with golden breadcrumbs, creamy cauliflower gratin was a favorite at homecoming dinners, potlucks, and holiday tables alike. Cauliflower was once an affordable and widely available vegetable, appreciated for its versatility. It absorbed flavors beautifully, making it a natural pairing for creamy, cheesy sauces. The gratin method, borrowed from classic French cooking, ensured that every bite was infused with deep, savory richness. The top layer of breadcrumbs added just the right amount of crunch, creating a contrast that kept each forkful interesting. Some home cooks added a pinch of nutmeg or mustard to enhance the flavor, while others used a mix of cheeses for extra depth. So why did it fade from dinner tables? As frozen and canned vegetables became more common, fresh cauliflower lost its appeal. Many home cooks swapped slow-baked dishes for quicker, less labor-intensive sides, and gratins became associated with special occasions rather than everyday meals. Boiled bread dumplings were sometimes known as sinkers, mostly because they would just sit there as if they were sinking into the plate, but these were really as frugal as it would get. This was a dish that was made from old or stale bread, and all it took was fat, some eggs, or just an egg really, and bread, flour, and water. These dumplings were something you would see a lot in immigrant neighborhoods, especially the ones that were always around factories, industrial sites, construction sites, just heavy-duty neighborhoods where most laborers would live to cut down on commute. They started off as a way of just using stale bread so that it wouldn't go to waste. But the question is, how do you actually make dumplings at home like that? Well, the bread was just soaked in hot water, and the flour was mixed in so that it would hold. If an egg wasn't there, it would be a bit looser of a dish, but the dough would still be thickened, and the mixture would just need to be formed into rough balls. The dumplings were then simmered and boiled, and there you had it. Each immigrant community had its own different variation of this too. German, Eastern European, and Czech communities all had their own definition of what making this should be like. Salted fish and porridge is an example of an essential combination in medieval times. It was especially popular in coastal and northern regions. This is because preservation was a massive deal in those areas due to how they were always just dealing with rougher, colder climates. Also, it might be surprising, but fish was a religious pillar for people. The Catholic Church back then was the reigning religious authority, and it would impose all kinds of fast days, especially every Friday. See, here, any kind of meat was forbidden, except fish. The logic behind this is that the practice of fasting during Lent and on Fridays is to abstain from fleshly meat, but since fish are cold-blooded, they don't come into flesh meat. It's a technical exception. The porridge itself was something that would contrast very well with the fermented taste of the fish, and in some households, people were adding herbs, onions, and garlic as well. This was a dish that was always eaten out of necessity. Chili cheese dogs weren't just dinner, they were an event. You boiled or grilled the hot dogs, lined them up on soft buns, then drowned them in canned chili. Not the fancy kind, just meat and beans and grease. Then came the shredded cheddar piled so high it melted into the cracks. Maybe you sprinkled chopped onions on top if you were brave. You served them on paper plates because the mess was biblical. Kids loved them. Dads swore by them. Friday nights in front of the game or Saturdays with friends in the garage, this was the food that brought people together. It wasn't healthy, it wasn't pretty, but it was loud, messy, and completely satisfying. You didn't eat just one. You ate 2 or 3 and felt it for the rest of the night. But no one cared. Because for those 10 greasy, cheesy minutes, you weren't worried about bills or work or anything else. You were just eating something that tasted good, with people you liked, with napkins stacked high and bellies filling fast. It was dinner you remembered, not because it was fancy, but because it was real. Few chemical names have caused as much unnecessary panic as dihydrogen monoxide. Despite sounding like something from a lab experiment gone wrong, this so-called hazardous substance was, in reality, nothing more than water. The term became the centerpiece of a long-running joke, highlighting how scientific jargon could manipulate public perception. In an era when food safety concerns were growing, misinformation had the power to create fear, even over something as essential as water. The 1960s saw increasing scrutiny over food additives, preservatives, and chemical compounds in everyday products. With rising concerns about artificial ingredients, people became more wary of what they consumed. The dihydrogen monoxide hoax played into that anxiety, proving how a lack of understanding could turn a necessity into a perceived threat. The irony? Every person alarmed by its presence had already been consuming it their entire lives. Though water itself is harmless in moderation, it's technically possible to overdose on it, a rare but real condition called water intoxication, where excessive consumption disrupts the body's sodium levels. There was a time when meatloaf was a household tradition. Made from simple, inexpensive ingredients, it was a staple of weeknight dinners and homecoming feasts alike. But what made this version special was the glaze, a perfectly balanced mix of ketchup and brown sugar that caramelized into a sticky, flavorful coating as it baked. Ground beef was one of the most affordable proteins, and by mixing it with breadcrumbs, eggs, and seasonings, home cooks could stretch a single pound to feed an entire family. Some variations included oats or crushed crackers, while others relied on Worcestershire sauce and mustard for added depth. But the secret weapon was always the glaze, a blend of sweet and tangy flavors that sealed in moisture and gave the loaf its signature glossy finish. So why did this dish start disappearing from dinner tables? As dietary trends shifted, meatloaf's reputation took a hit. Low-carb diets, leaner meat choices, and a move away from home-cooked comfort foods made it less popular. Pre-made frozen meatloaves also contributed, offering convenience at the cost of homemade flavor. Tell us which lost 1980s family dinner you miss most. Drop a comment, hit like, and subscribe to taste more forgotten flavors with us.